Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Andrew Stott and I'm the Emperor of Stomaria. Today we're going to be discussing the allies of Stomaria. So as many of our citizens and supporters will already know, Stomaria since its foundation has always been very selective with who it formally affiliates with, choosing to instead establish relations only with those in which there is some mutual benefit. So when it came to mutual recognition treaties and other such agreements, this is something that Stomaria has never indulged in, for the simple reason that it doesn't provide us with anything. It doesn't provide any additional prosperity, it doesn't provide any additional security, and it doesn't provide any additional legitimacy. Put simply, such agreements are not worth the paper that they're written on, especially when you consider most of these agreements aren't actually printed out on paper, because apparently even that is considered too much effort by some. And so consequently, Stomaria has often found itself in a very paradoxical position, in which on the one hand, Stomaria is a very popular nation building project when compared to a lot of the other entities out there. And we have received many hundreds of applications for an alliance or for one entity or another to become integrated into the wider empire itself, all of which for the last few years have been rejected for one reason or another. However, on the other hand, despite the popularity, despite the fact that we have so many applications to become involved in Stomaria or associated or affiliated with Stomaria in some way, we have nevertheless had a policy of self-imposed isolation from the vast majority of self-defined micronations and even nation-building projects because of the very strict criteria that we have when it comes to who can and who can't affiliate with Stomaria. Put another way, Stomaria was founded in June 2019, nearly 6 years ago at this point. But the last time that we actually approved an alliance between Stomaria and an external entity was back in April 2022, more than 3 years ago at this point, and that was with the Kingdom of Lithua. And the last time an entity was integrated into the empire itself was back in November 2022, when, regrettably, Bran Howell was permitted to join the empire. Of course, Bran Howell did end up leaving the following month alongside the Kingdom of Molossia, who had also joined earlier in that year. And while it turned out that Bran Howell leaving was the best thing that could have happened, given his subsequent and very bizarre activities, confessions, and revelations about his past, it was nevertheless an event that prompted us to raise the bar further in order to prevent, or at least reduce the likelihood, of member states and allies from becoming a revolving door. We didn't want to have to constantly announce new allies and new member states, only for them to dissolve or to leave very shortly afterwards. Because even though, as I say, we've always been relatively selective with who we choose to work with in a formal capacity, obviously the bar at the time was not high enough, and there were a lot of instances in which member states or allies simply fell by the wayside, left, or whatever else. And this obviously had an impact on our ability to function properly, because we were never quite sure as to who was going to stay around for a long period of time and who we could build a relationship with within that time frame. Of course, we have been fortunate in that we have had entities that have been integrated into the empire and have stuck around. They have been an integral part of what we've been building over the last few years. So we have the Kingdom of Wayward that became an external ally of Stomaria back in September 2019, before becoming integrated into the empire itself in September 2021. And they have remained as such ever since. Likewise, you have the Republic of Vesta that became integrated into the empire in November 2022, shortly before Bran Howell, but they have stuck around and they have contributed significantly to Stomaria and to the empire ever since. That said, these are generally outliers, and for the most part, any entity that has become affiliated with Stomaria as an external ally or become integrated into the empire in some form or another have fallen by the wayside. And this isn't anything to do with what Stomaria itself is doing. It's just simply a case of micronations and nation-building projects having very short lifespans for the most part. It is very difficult to gauge which entity, which project is going to have a lifespan that does extend into the years, the decades, the generations, and which ones are simply going to be a few months along before petering out and dying a death. And all that is to say that shortly after Branhal and the Kingdom of Molossia left the Empire in December 2022, we began to introduce new criteria for those that wished to formally affiliate with Stomaria in some form or another, be it as an external ally or as a member state of the Empire itself. And as a result, we now consider the following criteria when it comes to those that want to apply for such relations. Longevity. When was a nation founded? Consistency. How often has the nation changed its name, its flag, its government structure, and so forth? Maturity. How old is the leading authority of that nation, and has that individual engaged in any activity that could bring Stomaria into disrepute? Ideology. Are the values and objectives of the nation compatible with Stomaria's? Activity. Does the nation have a proven track record of consistent activity and progress? Territory. Does the nation claim any territory? And if so, what does that territory consist of? Community. Has the nation developed a verifiable community and cultural identity? And it's because of this criteria, the things that we consider when we get these applications for some kind of formal relations, that we have gone more than 3 years at this point without approving a single one, despite having received hundreds of applications to become affiliated with Stomaria in some way. However, over the last few months in particular, I've taken a more keen interest in surveying the nation-building landscape to see who's out there, to see who aligns with our vision for the future, and who would have the necessary staying power to actually work with in a formal capacity for a long period of time. And I assure you, this search was no small feat, because there is no directory, there's no list of nation-building projects that I can simply run through and check off. I mean, the closest thing you have is perhaps something like MicroWiki, where it has thousands upon thousands of micronations listed on their site. However, as I've made clear before, micronationalism is not nation building, and you'd be quite easily forgiven for rattling through the first 300 or 400 micronations on such lists and then simply giving up, because trying to find a community that is level-headed, realistic, pragmatic, that is governed by grown men and women that actually aspire to build something genuine, that is a rarity within micronationalism. Likewise, if you were to hop onto virtually any micronational group, forum, subreddit, or server, you would find exactly the same results. Nothing in there, or very little in there, that would actually be of any use to you. I used to say in times past that for every 100 micronations you come across, you might find one that would be worth engaging with in a formal capacity. But over the last few months, I'm starting to question as to whether or not even that figure, even that ratio, is being far too generous. However, there are a small number of entities that I am currently corresponding with. In fact, I have a video call later this evening with one of them about establishing formal relations between Stomaria and one or more of these other entities. And this is something that is very exciting from my own perspective, but also I do want to make sure that the desire to build relations with like-minded entities does not erode the criteria that we have in place. I don't want to take shortcuts. I don't want to go down the same route that we went before. And so while nothing has been confirmed, I can say with some confidence that the initial discussions that we've had with a lot of these entities has been very encouraging. And by the time this video comes out, something more concrete, something more formal might already be underway. However, I cannot confirm any of this as of this moment in time. And if there are other nation-building projects out there, other entities that we are not currently corresponding with about establishing these formal relations, and you believe that you meet the necessary criteria and you want to have some kinds of formal affiliations with Stomaria, then simply get in touch and let us know. Because ultimately, I do not have the time or the resources to actually find all of the nation-building projects of the world. And it would be very straightforward and very easy if those that come across these sorts of videos and are interested in establishing those relations actually get in touch and make us aware of their existence. Stomaria, as always, is marching forward. And as we approach our 6-year anniversary on the 16th of June, it is our hope that we will have some formal affiliations to report on, some alliances that we can announce, the first since 2022. And this in itself would be a great milestone. And alongside all of our other accomplishments over the past year, it's clear to see that Stomaria is moving in the right direction. So let's see what happens over the next few weeks. It's going to be some exciting times. If you want to learn more about Stomaria or play an active role in our development and expansion, visit our website at www.stomaria.com and find out what it means to be a Stomarian.